You walk around downtown. You pass by hundreds and thousands of people every day. Every one of those people has a story to tell, but we never get to hear them. Hello, I'm Michael Lyons. My body may be on Earth, but my mind is somewhere out there in the interstellar void, just beyond our solar system. This is Human Interesting. On Human Interesting, I want to hear your answer to the question, what is the most interesting thing that's ever happened to you? Today I'm speaking with
Emily Nixon, and that's EMILYNIXON.
From Vancouver, British Columbia. Emily moved to Toronto for Ryerson University's acting program.
I just graduated in, I guess, June, whenever we convocated, whenever that was. And so since then, I've been on 3 different theatre contracts. And since that last theatre contract finished, which was Summerworks, I guess, I've been exploring what it's like to be homeless and to not have employment. So that's an adventure.
We sit down to talk on the Kerr Hall Quad field at Ryerson. It's a clear, warm, sunny day. Though there is a cool breeze, it feels like one of the last days of short-sleeve weather. I met Emily through the youth program at Buddies in Bad Times Theatre. When we were working together on a show, I found Emily intense but likable. She worked hard at her craft. Theatre, after all, is her life.
I'm completely passionate about what I do, and that's totally what I live for, is what I do. So I don't want to take time off from doing the thing that is the most important to me in the world.
Yoga and meditation being another important part of her life. Emily and I talk about her homelessness.
I've just been couch surfing on different friends' couches. My cousin yesterday, I called her and she was just like, so where are you staying this weekend? And I was like, I have no idea. And she's like, wow, I can't even imagine that. So, but I'm definitely learning about that because something I hadn't considered for people that are out on the street is something I'm encountering is depression as a result of not feeling like I have a foundation.
And dealing with anxiety and depression.
Feels kind of like you have a really heavy blanket on you all the time, where it's like hard to move and it's hard to breathe and it's hard to think and everything is slower and heavier. And you just don't want to do anything. That's my experience of it.
Emily talks about how meditation and her Buddhist practices are a big part of alleviating anxiety. I'm interested, so I ask her, can she walk me through what she'd do in a moment of anxiety?
So if I were freaking out right now, there has to be a moment of recognition, so I'd just be like, okay, I'm freaking out. I need to address this. Okay, so I hear people talking. I hear the wind moving through the leaves. I hear this hum of some kind of building over there. And I keep going, like I hear cars over there, that truck backing up, things like that.
Cool.
So that's a tool I use. Or alternately, I'll actually look at the thought itself and I'll say, okay, what's the internal dialogue going on here? What is the emotion actually? And I'll pick it apart and it's, okay, so maybe the emotion is a combination of, oh my God, I'm never gonna, I didn't get this job, I'm never gonna work again, everyone hates me, everyone thinks I'm a terrible actor or whatever. And then I'll just notice that it's that dialogue. And what else is that emotion composed of? Okay, so it's composed of tension in my throat and tingling in my fingers and sweaty hands. And I'll just break it down that way. And once I start to identify all the parts, it tends to not be as scary.
What is the most interesting thing that's ever happened to Emily?
a few years ago when I went to India and Thailand for 4 months, it ended up, like my friends back home ended up nicknaming it Emily's Hospital Tour of Asia. Because I stayed in, like 5 hospitals while I was in India for different things, for amoebic dysentery. And then there was the possibility, which was terrifying, that I might have HIV because of some of the needles that were used on me. That was terrifying.
She didn't, thankfully, but that's not even the most dramatic thing that happened.
So yeah, I was just in a monastery in Bangkok, walking around by myself, and then this dog came at me from like 10 meters away and just bit the back of my leg. But because Thai monks can't touch women, these poor guys were just standing there wanting to help me desperately, but like, I can't help you or else I'll be like excommunicated or something like that. So they called an ambulance, and the ambulance turned out to be literally a pickup truck. And they put me in the back of the pickup truck, and they said, hold on to these straps. And we drove across Bangkok with my leg like bleeding out. And it turned out the dog had rabies. And then it got really infected. So 4 days later, the surgeon said, I think we'll have to amputate it. And thankfully they didn't.
I just can't imagine being practically alone in a country halfway around the world and the doctors saying, we have to amputate.
But that was definitely an adventure. In the end, it was a good thing because the hospital I had to stay in for my infected leg was 100 times nicer than any of the hostels I could have afforded.
But the trip wasn't all bad. There were some really fantastic parts of it. Many, actually, including...
On that same trip, though, I did spend a month in a monastery in North India, a Tibetan monastery, where I was lucky enough to... This is probably the most interesting thing that's ever happened to me. There's this very high teacher who's named Mingyur Rinpoche, and he's like a bit of a superstar Tibetan teacher, and he travels the world speaking. And I happened to be there at a time when no one was there. And it's the only time in like the history of this monastery it's ever happened. And so this high monk, he's a Rinpoche, he gave me daily private teachings, which is like, normally you can't even get close to this man. And he saw me every morning for like a month. And he asked me to, they had me teach acting classes to like the 12-year-old monks that were there while I was staying there. So that was pretty great. One of the things I remember most distinctly was walking into, there was like this monastery, and it's 12 hours drive north of New Delhi. And I was on a horrible bus for 12 hours. And I got there, and there was like a little internet cafe almost for the monks to use on the monastery grounds. And I go in, and they were playing Rihanna's Umbrella. And this was high in the mountains, like high in the Himalayas. And I was just surrounded by like young Tibetan monks, and they were listening to Umbrella. And that was really surreal.
So, just a short one today. On my birthday, October 16th, I was checked into the hospital. You guessed it, shuffling around like an old man again. I was diagnosed with amoebic dysentery. It was bad. No, awful. The worst kind of sick. The worst kind of physical pain I've ever experienced in my entire life. I actually said out loud to myself at one point, I want to die. That was from Emily's travel blog on October 21st, 2009. I wanted to talk to Emily about suffering.
And the suffering is very important to practice also.
Mingyur Rinpoche says on his YouTube channel that after Gautama Buddha had achieved enlightenment, he traveled to Varanasi. There he gave the first Dharma teachings to 5 students. The first teaching, life is suffering.
Knowing suffering is suffering. Knowing nature of suffering. So if you know nature of suffering, then you can free from suffering. So one of the best way to eliminate, to be free from suffering, to recognize suffering.
Emily is a confirmed Buddhist.
Do I believe in a higher power? No, I don't really. But I believe in karma, which is like part of Buddhism. with my basic understanding of it, like super basic understanding of it, it's essentially, every reaction has an equal and opposite reaction, essentially. And just that I find that actually really helpful because there's a belief in Buddhism that whatever happens to you is in response to actions you have taken either in this life or in a previous life. So I had a Buddhist friend share this with me once, and I kind of use it, which is like, if something really crappy is happening to you, you can just kind of shrug a little bit and be like, oh, cool, I'm burning off that karma. So it's like bad karma that you don't have to deal with.
I'm a pessimist. It's hard for me to reconcile the intense worldly suffering with Emily's belief in this sacred equation that peace, balance, pain, and disorder ripple throughout time. But the thought is comforting.
Something that's the most significant to me about my practice is that, like, I practice every morning. I do, currently it's a half-hour meditation practice every day on, you work on a specific set of teachings for a specific period of time and then you move on. But the practice in the morning is always, you kind of recite something that's just essentially the equivalent of, may all beings everywhere be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, and experience happiness and all the causes of happiness.
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
Yeah, so, sorry, I'm just trying to remember. May all beings everywhere be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, and be happy and have all the causes of happiness. So I start off my day really, really investing in that, in like really, really wanting everybody everywhere without exception to be happy and free and to be free from any kind of suffering. And for me, that's a really important way to start my day, is just to really dedicate my energy towards that and the really genuine wish for everyone to be happy.
Human Interesting is a production of the Ryersonian. It is written and narrated by me, Michael Lyons, and produced by Michael Lyons and Peter Malonis. Questions, comments, interested in contributing a story or music to the show? Email michael.lyons, that's michael.lyons, @ryerson.ca.